Good afternoon. I think we're ready to begin with the next panel. It is a great pleasure and an honor for me to be here today to moderate this panel on women, war, and peace. My name is Benedetta Berti. I'm a young Atlanticist from Italy and a fellow at the Institute for National Security Studies. Today's topic is somewhat overlooked in the broader security-related debate, and we're going to talk specifically about women, war, and peace, addressing the impact of United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325. Before I go on and introduce today's speakers, I want to say very briefly a word about UNSC Resolution 1325 and why it's such an important, a landmark international legal framework, and how it can and should impact the discussion we've been having today at the Young Atlanticist NATO Summit. So UNSC Resolution 1325 was adopted in the year 2000 by the UN Security Council, and it has two interrelated objectives. Firstly, to recognize and work on lessening the disproportionate impact that war has on women and girls today, and secondly, to recognize the pivotal role that women could play in all stages of conflict management, conflict resolution, and sustainable peace. So it's about prevention of gender-based violence. It's about delivering relief and recovery strategies that are gender-sensitive. It's about protection of women and girls from gender-based and sexual violence. And finally, it's about participation, encouraging participation of women at all levels of decision-making process. And before I introduce the speakers, I just want to quote U.S. Ambassador at Large for Global Women's Issue, Milan Verveer, who said about the importance of participation of women. Too often, women's roles are marginalized because they're not seen in terms of their leadership. We must see women as leaders, not as victims. We must also view their participation not as a favor to women, but as essential to peace and security. So with this very inspiring thought in mind, I want to introduce Ambassador Verveer, who was appointed by President Barack Obama to serve as Ambassador at Large for Global Women's Issue. The President created this position, and this reflected the elevated importance that the Obama administration placed upon gender issue. In her position as U.S. Ambassador at Large for Global Women's Issue, Ambassador has been coordinating foreign policy initiatives designed to promote and advance women on a global scale. Prior to serving as ambassador, she also served as chair and co-CEO of Vital Voices Global Partnership, an NGO which she co-founded, and will deal specifically with the issue of promoting and empowering women and creating the new leaders of tomorrow. Prior to that, she served as assistant to the president and chief of staff to the first lady in the Clinton administration, where she was also heavily involved in promoting the participation of women. In that capacity, she also led the effort to establish the president's Interagency Council on Women. She has a very long and established career and has served in a number of leadership roles in both public policy organization and legislative staff. Our second esteemed guest and panelist for today is Farkhunda Nadri, a member of parliament from Afghanistan. Ms. Nadri was educated in the UK and in Uzbekistan. She was born and raised in Afghanistan. Upon completing her education, she returned to Afghanistan, when since then she's been active. She's been one of the leading emerging voices, a politically active woman in Afghanistan, member of parliament. Since 2007, she's been serving as the head of the Women's Committee and Youth Association for her party. She has been also active at the community level. She's been, upon returning to Afghanistan, she personally overlooked the reconstruction of a cultural center and public libraries. Since then, she's been active and instrumental in the creation of an health center. So she's both a political figure, a community organizer, and overall a very inspiring woman. So with that in mind, I would start the discussion by first asking Ambassador Verveer to address the audience.
Well, thank you so much, and let me tell you, it is a great pleasure to be here with all of you young Atlantists who are connecting and engaging on some of the most important foreign policy issues of our time. I've been told that one of the big discussions that's been going on through your Facebook connections has been on this topic, and I'm happy to hear that, and I'm glad that we have a chance to discuss it this afternoon. I also want to say that it is a delight for me to be back today with Ferhunda. We were on a panel yesterday that was also joined by the Foreign Minister of Afghanistan discussing these and related issues on her country, and as you will hear, she is an eloquent spokesperson on a range of topics. Secretary Clinton has called this the age of participation, a time when information can transcend borders, when opinions and ideas scale firewalls, and each and every individual is poised to be a valued member of the global community. And that certainly includes millions and millions of women around the world who are still too often marginalized when it comes to these significant topics of our time and the work that needs to be done, and yet they have an absolutely critical role to play. As you heard, the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325, more than a decade ago, linked women to issues of peace and security in a very significant way. And NATO, to its credit, has been implementing the Security Council resolution, has developed its own action plan, and in the summit declaration that was released yesterday, it notes that NATO will continue to integrate 1325 into all of its operations because NATO has certainly recognized the need for women's perspectives and crisis management, in operational planning, in exercise planning, and so much more, so that a better job, a more effective outcome can be achieved. They noted in the report that they put out, that NATO put out on the first anniversary of its plan implementing 1325, that more work needs to be done on better training and staffing, but saluted the work that many of the ISAF countries have been doing in this regard. You know, the Nobel Peace Prize Committee recognized last year that the role that women can play needs to be spotlighted, and to remind all of us who may be in the trenches of operations, who are coming up the ladder to take one's place in the years to come, that women do have a critical role to play. And in their Peace Prize award last year, they recognized Liberia and Yemen, women, current president of Liberia, and another woman, Leme Gabawi, as well as a woman who's known as the godmother of the Yemen effort in the overall Arab Spring world. And in so doing, I think once again show that women have taken their place, continue to take their place, and often it's an uphill struggle, and yet from Northern Ireland to Liberia to South Africa to Rwanda, we see the difference that women's participation has made in areas of conflict, transition out of conflict into peacemaking, and certainly into post-conflict reconstruction. We, in our own country, have been working in the United States on these issues. At the end of last year, President Obama issued the United States National Action Plan on Women, Peace, and Security, and an accompanying executive order to ensure that in all of our efforts in this large arena, whether emanating from our Department of Defense or from the State Department, from AID, or other agencies, that we are focused on ensuring that we're playing the kind of leadership role we can, should, and must play in incorporating a focus on women's participation and addressing issues of sexual and gender-based violence against women, and also in providing equal access in our humanitarian operations during relief and recovery. So around the world, from Afghanistan to the Arab Spring countries, from Sudan to South Sudan, so many other places, women are working at the national and local level to play the kind of role that they can in ending conflict and in sustaining a peace. I just returned from Burma last week, where, as many of you may know, there have been ongoing ethnic conflicts in many of the ethnic communities there, pitting the communities against the army. And it is very clear as this change is overtaking Burma that in the process of working to achieve ceasefires, which is much that is going on now, that as agreements begin to be worked on for sustainable peace, women there, as everywhere, will have to be part of that process going forward. I also want to note that having Ferhunda here, and she will certainly go into more detail about the issues in her own country, but it's obviously clear from this summit that Afghanistan has been a critical topic and will continue to be because of the role of NATO and ISAF in all of this. And I think it's just worth saying that in the summit declaration, with respect to Afghanistan, the declaration notes the importance of the full participation of Afghan women in reconstruction and in the political processes and peace and reconciliation processes going forward, and the need to respect institutional arrangements protecting women's rights in Afghanistan. So, as so many countries represented among all of you, the United States has been working to, with Afghanistan to ensure Afghan women's participation in the various international conferences that have been taking place over the last couple years, going forward in the Peace Jirga that took place last year, in the upcoming Tokyo conference that will be taking place in early July, because their role is central in all of this, as it is and will be central in the infrastructure they are setting up in peace councils at the national, provincial, and local level. Because if women's voices are silenced or marginalized in this process, I think the likelihood for a durable peace, for stability, for the prospect of economic opportunity will certainly be subverted in Afghanistan. So advocating for women on these issues, if we want to advance social, political, and economic progress around our world, is absolutely critical. We have to seize all of the tools of 21st century statecraft, all of those effective tools. And I would posit that 1325 and its full implementation is one of those critical tools we must seriously work to implement more vigorously.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to be here and talk about such an important topic, which is very debatable and at the same time very important at this time in Afghanistan. And it is a pleasure to be in a second panel with Ambassador Verveer. I must say that politics per se is a very challenging field to any part of the world and to anyone. But the combination of being a female and a younger parliamentarian in a country when seeding democracy on the rocks of extremism is very fascinating. So perhaps would it be the reason for me to be involved in politics? there are tremendous reasons behind my involvement in political world. But I would mention one of them. And that is to say, because I am an Afghan. I'm an Afghan through and through to the core of my being. Thus, I'm not able to choose any easy path in life. I have to discover my existence and fight for who I am, because I am a woman. That's a very simple relation between me and politics. Now I would like to touch the real topics of agenda, which is women in war, peace, and the impact of Security Council Resolution 1325. In this regard, I could talk about the mechanism and processes of the Security Council Resolution 1325, National Action Plan of Afghanistan, which is currently under creation, and many persons and organizations are involved. But it's too technical to talk about. I wish that Minister of Foreign Affairs, Afghan Minister of Foreign Affairs was here, that he could talk about it, because Ministry of Foreign Affairs is the responsible organ about this. But allow me to talk about the spirit of Security Council Resolution 1325. I'll talk about this in context of the failure of Afghan and the international community to ensure that the rule of law and the gender equality norms are reaching the Afghan Supreme Court. I believe that the Security Council Resolution 1325, in our context, does not only apply for the participation of women in the peace process, but also to the institutions set up to ensure peace and development. That means in judicial, in parliament, in the executive. The Constitution of Afghanistan grants equal rights to men and women in Article 22, whereas in Article 83, it legitimizes a quota system for the participation of women in the parliament. And this time, successfully, we went beyond the quota. Now we have got 69 women in the parliament, which is brilliant. But the main problem is that this quota system, widely confused and narrowly applied only to parliament, even though the legal logic is to transfer this norm to the two other pillars of powers, when the lower house of parliament legitimizes their power by means of their vote of confidence. Now, if briefly I look at the executive branch, I would say that the spirit of Security Council resolution, up to a certain degree, has been implemented. And it has been successful, because now we have got 3 female ministers. Indeed, 3 out of 25 is not adequate at all, but for bigger ambitions, we need more time to reach where we want to reach. Therefore, what we have today is a success. Despite all the shortcomings, what we have in 2 pillars of power, such as parliament and an executive branch, it's a huge success for us. But ladies and gentlemen, my greatest concern and frank apprehension comes from the absence of women in the Supreme Court, which is regarded to be the highest court of the land. Up to date, we did not succeed to even bring a single woman in the Supreme Court. Question must come in people's mind that why women has been marginalized from judicial branch, especially the Supreme Court. Why? Maybe some would argue, even in the most advanced country, women do not have seat in the Supreme Court. Why in a country like Afghanistan that We just have 10 years of democracy demanding that. A great deal of reason and argument exists, but for the sake of limit of time, I will just condense it by stating why after 10 years of democracy and the achievement that we have, meaning that we have women as MPs and ministers, but Afghan women still worry about losing what they gained for 10 years. Why is that? We have got ministers, we have got MPs, but you still worry you would lose what you have in your hand. The answer is that the core power exists within our Supreme Court. And if our Supreme Court at any time decides the participation of women in the other two branches of power to be symbolic, they can do it. So that's why it is very important that we have to concentrate on that. So, in our context, again, UN Security Council Resolution 1325 clearly outlines the role of women as political actors during war and conflict. So this can be used as a tool to ensure women's involvement in key institutions, especially in Supreme Court, where their presence can help to prevent violations against women and ensure that erosion of rights do not take place. Now I would, in a very brief words, talk about the peace process. Peace process is an inevitable process in Afghanistan because war per se did not provide any solution for us. But for the peace process to be successful, it has to be inclusive and must include women actively. Right now we have got 70 members in the High Peace Council where they negotiate peace process. But out of that 70, we have got 9 women and 61 men. Here, we should not get confused with the participation. We should not get confused the participation of women with their presence. These 9 women that we have in the High Peace Council, in that particular place, very sensitive issues are discussed. So that means that women in there need more support to raise their voice. But at the same time, 9 women in front of 61 men, they would find it so difficult to even join the discussion. That's why women has been so marginalized in the peace processes. So physically they are present, but in the activities, they are really marginalized. So, Security Council Resolution 1325 sets the obligation to UN member states that women must be included in political discussions and in debate and negotiations that include in talks with Taliban. Therefore, we require international community to not set up talks where women are excluded, but instead make our presence conditional for all the talks. My request, therefore, to all UN member states and all UN agencies who are active in Afghanistan is to follow the letter and the spirit of Security Council Resolution 1325 and make sure that you do not exclude women from any part of peace processes. And to request the international organization to ensure that this is monitored. This has to be done immediately and cannot wait until our national action plan of Security Council Resolution 1325 is completed, endorsed, and hopefully applied. Because by that time, maybe most of the important discussion and negotiations are taking place, and women would be excluded. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time and your patience.
I think I'm just going to open it up for questions and waive my so-called moderator's prerogative, since I'm sure there's going to be a lot of interest. So, please, Spela.
Thank you, Benedetta. I'm Spela Kleins. I'm a female young Atlanticist from Slovenia. Since this question is more of Western culture and perception of gender and war and peace, I'll address it to Ambassador Weber, and of course I'll be delighted if you have any additional input. But my question is, I've attended way too many all-female-led panels with female participations and most questions coming from women. My question is, where are the men when we're discussing gender and peace? And I would like to hear your inputs and what you think their role could be in this discussion. Thank you.
Well, I think their role is essential, and in a similar panel yesterday, we had the Foreign Minister of Afghanistan on the panel, and he's a male, the last time I checked. So this is not the exclusive province of women. In fact, men are essential to this discussion. This has been discussed. It was President Obama who launched the U.S. National Action Plan. It is NATO that is in the middle of the discussions of the implementation of NATO's National Action Plan. So this is by no means the province of women. It is women who often have to prod and say, look, much more has to be done, not just as a favor to women, as Benedetta quoted me back, but because this is so essential to the outcome that men and women want to see for the benefit of men, women, and boys and girls. So this is not the province of women, and I think the more we can have men and women in these discussions, the better.
Hello, I'm from Turkey, Merve Seren, and I'm the advisor of a member of the parliament, and it's also a congresswoman. And we have got so many prejudices also in Turkey about women in politics. And I would like to ask you a question. The first question is that what is the impact of the sects in the women's in the politics? For instance, in Turkey, you can be a Muslim, but the sect is very important on how you perceive the politics. For instance, the Sunni women from the Hanefis, they are much more, dealing with this politics. But the Arab women in the east of Turkey, they are belonging to another sect, and they don't really, they prefer to stay at home, and they don't care about the sects. And the sects. And the second is, as a Muslim country, do you have got any inspiration or kind of an model country as a Muslim, or how do you think about the Turks, the Turkish Muslim woman? Because with the AK Party, we are a religious party, maybe you can call it conservative, but they increased the level of the woman in the parliament very high, according to before the previous years and the Republican sides. So.
Women's participation is very essential in a way that what I'm thinking that in politics, unfortunately, most of the time, they bring a topic that divides everyone. And if you go to different religious sects, then you lose the unity. We have got problem in Afghanistan in terms of ethnicity. So if you really want to take the national issue and narrow it down in a way that you lose your path, then it doesn't give you anything. What I believe can make women's rights activists to really go and achieve what they want to achieve, they have to have unity. And if you go to ethnicity division or through religious sect division, then you're not going to get anywhere. And at the same time, I think it's very important for women to realize, if I talk about Afghanistan mainly, politics has been dominated by men. So it's a game that they know very well how to play it. So when women enters in politics, and if they do not find themselves, then they will get really highly affected by male's agenda. And they will get to the point that they will lose who they are. And what is the purpose of their presence in politics? So for that reason, I believe that women should find their own agenda, and first of all, they have to know that I am a woman. Anything that I do, for instance, me being a member of parliament, I concentrate on two groups, youth and women. But I would never would forget that I'm MP, meaning that I have got responsibility on the national level, which is full of challenges, but it is simultaneously coming with the other two responsibilities.
Could I just add to that in terms of the importance of women in predominantly Muslim cultures who are aspiring to bring the kinds of outcomes that Farahund is involved in Afghanistan and other women have been involved in many countries. In Morocco, for example, it was the women there who were able finally to achieve family law reform, which is one of the most difficult areas that women aspire in these societies to be able to get reforms achieved. And there they appealed not to those, there were those who said family law reform wasn't possible because it was somehow inimical to Quranic values. And the women said, no, I'm a good Muslim. I know the values that I espouse. I know our religious traditions. And they fought back on religious grounds. And when that reform was promulgated by the king, the reform, let's say women have right to custody of their children, it was followed by a Quranic verse. And I find, and they did that with all the provisions of the new law, and I find that when women from who come from similar cultural backgrounds working on these kinds of issues can come together is extremely useful. And back to our Turkish questioner who asked our Afghan colleague here about which country might be most appealing in terms of assisting. I remember a group of Afghan women who came to Turkey for leadership training programs, and their response was it was one of the best places for us because we were able to see the kind of progress women can make within our own contextual, culturally contextual and religious context that's much more familiar to us than had we gone someplace else. So it does make a difference to have these kinds of cross-border experiences among women who were on the front lines of advancing change.
Question from the gentleman to our right, and then I'm going to go to Hasib. So please.
Thank you very much. My name is Lawrence Cochran. I'm here with the International Model Program that Dr. Nawanze runs through Howard University. I appreciate your time coming to speak to us. You said earlier that women are an integral part to global security. How does female reproductive rights come into that role as women's rights in global security?
Well, in terms of women and security, it is hard to know how security, sustainable peace, stability, economic progress can be achieved if half the population is not part of working towards those goals. No country can get ahead if it leaves half of its people behind. So let me posit that as a first principle. Now, these kinds of issues where there is tremendous violence against women, and in several societies even today that are in the midst of armed conflicts, rape as a tool of war, for example, is a targeted part of the strategy. Divide and conquer in the family, divide the community, achieve your goal if you're the armed combatant. In those situations, women desperately need care to be healed, both physically and psychologically. So they're not maybe central issues, but these are the very kinds of issues in protecting women that have to be addressed by societies in conflict.
Thank you for being here. It's been great listening to both of you. A quick question for Ms. Nadri. You spoke about the role of women in the so-called peace process, but if I could get you to comment on the process as a whole. What do you think of its viability, and do you even think the Taliban as a group, or a group that could talk, that yourself as a female politician, other female politicians in the country could even find a way to find an accommodation with them? Is that possible? Is that viable, the process as a whole?
Thank you very much. Of course, peace process is one of the complicated process that we have in Afghanistan. But as I mentioned, that war by itself didn't provide us with a solution. So simultaneously, we have to have this process. But when we go to the peace process and talking with Taliban, and of course Taliban talking with women, it seems something very rare for them. Not rare for them, for women, but imagine to what level it can be difficult for them to accept. But if we want to go for peace, we have to find an option. Me as a woman, as an Afghan, I do not have any problem with Taliban. If they want to come, and even if they want to be in parliament, but to express their views through a democratic ways. Because the parliament that we have right now is a great achievement. We as an Afghan know that. Before 10 years back, I mean, if we go even before Taliban, it was very difficult for people who are sitting in parliament right now, for that time to even see each other or shake hands. But now everyone comes in the parliament, they want to use the mic and express their view. So that shows that our previous leaders who were going through civil wars, they came to the point to accept it, that they have to go through democracy and they have to gain what they want to gain through this process. But the fear that we have with Taliban is that they do not accept anything. So for that reason, we divided Taliban. Taliban, who comes with an ideological reason, they will never come to peace process because they have got such a big ambition that is beyond Afghanistan. But unfortunately, for 10 years' time, for 10 years that passed in Afghanistan, and we had democracy. During that period of time, we had many Afghans who were not happy with the government, so they joined Taliban. So when you distinguish between these two, you say this is the group that they will come to the peace process. Taliban was so sophisticated that they used this anger of citizens and they attracted them to their group. That's why they grown stronger. But now we want to do the reverse. So meaning that we want to bring them back. So with those people, they want to do the peace process. But of course, among them, there might be fundamentalist groups. That's the reason that we say we have to have more women than 9 to give them more support. And at the same time, you have to provide facilities for women that they can sit around the table while peace is negotiated with Taliban. But this does not give any reason or any meaning if women are present in the High Peace Council, but when there is negotiation for peace is going, they are absent because they say, well, Taliban has got allergy towards them, so give them some medicine that they can cope to see women around. So this is what we are arguing, that if the peace process is going on, we want women to be in each step, that when Taliban wants to come back, they have to have this in their mind beforehand, that they have no choice but to cope with women. This is what we need.
Or maybe we'll get to 2 more questions. So with that in mind, if Laura wants to take the floor and... Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want to go first, or would you like
Please
her to?
Please go ahead.
You go ahead.
Thank you. Laura Delzita from Lithuania, Young Atlanticist. I'm really fascinated by the developments of women's rights in Afghanistan. And It's such a pleasure to have you here, Ms. Nasiri. But what I'm really interested to hear, and I think for others as well, is the practicality of being part of a process. So I was wondering whether you could tell us how much power do you feel like you have as a female in a parliament when the discussions are ongoing, not only about female rights, but for example, on economy, on security and others. Do you feel at ease that you can express yourself and that you are being listened to? Or is it still more of a 35 is a good number to have women's part of a parliament? Thank you.
Thank you. I have to be fair and to say that, yes, Afghan women inside the parliament, they do have the power up to extent that they express their view. And maybe this concept is fresh. It needs more time to develop and to make it more stronger. Yes, women do not only express their views in terms of women, they do express their views in different issues. If you talk about finance and budget, which is one of the important aspects of Afghan parliament, it's not only women who's got problem with it, it's men who's got problem with it because it's very technical. But I understand the core of your question that whether women can express their views in different topics. Yes, they can do it. But of course, it's full of challenges. And I think most of the time it's very difficult for women when they talk about women's rights than talking about anything else. Because at the beginning I mentioned that politics has been dominated by men. And they need more supporters, even if they are women. So they want to give their words to women to express it. But if women talk about their own agenda, there's more tendency for them to get really sensitive. So yes, we do have these achievements, but the only problem that we have in Afghanistan currently is there is an atmosphere of uncertainty. People are asking too much question and they feel that they are in darkness right now because 2014, when the concept comes that the international community gets out of Afghanistan, people are threatened. They are threatened so much. And they have the rights because for 3 decades they went through so much that they find it so difficult to trust that, yes, they can be in a very peaceful environment, especially that Afghanistan is not a post-war country. War is going on in Afghanistan right now. And especially when Taliban's concept comes, people have got more fear about that as well. Because everyone remembers the regime, not only women, even men, because they force men to put beers. So it's just like anything that comes compulsory, it's difficult for people to accept. But yes, up to a certain degree, I mentioned that we do have success in Afghanistan. And thankfully that Afghan women today, as a politician, works in different fields.
Unfortunately, I get a notice that we run out of time, so please join me in thanking our panelists today. It was a great honor to have you here.